Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupāda Paramahamsa Parivrājikācārya Aṣṭotra Śata Śrī Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupāda Paramahamsa Parivrājikācārya Aṣṭotra Śata Śrī Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Shama Kunda Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Mathura Vrindavana Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, just for fun, I wanted to read about Amalaki Ekadashi. This is from the Ekadashi Mahatmya. Amalaki Ekadashi. The topics of the glories of Amalaki Ekadashi, which occurs during the waxing moon in the month of February/March, are described in the Brahmanda Purana, in the conversation between King Mandhata and the sage Vasishta. Once, King Mandhata asked the sage Vasishta, "O most fortunate one, if you are pleased with and merciful to me, then kindly describe to me about a vow by following of which I can attain all auspiciousness." The sage Vasishta replied, "O king, now I will explain to you the glories and history of a great vow which awards one all auspiciousness. O king, the name of this vow is Amalaki Ekadashi. The influence of the piety accumulated by following this Ekadashi certainly destroys all one's sinful reactions and awards liberation, as well as the result of donating 1,000 cows in charity. In the ancient times, there was a city named Vaidasa that was inhabited by many healthy and prosperous Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. O lion-hearted king, there was no atheistic or sinful person in this beautiful city. The entire city was filled with the sound of Vedic mantras. In this famous city, there lived a truthful, pious king named Chaitraratha, who was born in the family of King Pasabinduka, a member of the dynasty of the moon. King Chaitraratha was very powerful, heroic, opulent, and well-versed in the scriptures. During the reign of this king, all auspiciousness and prosperity was found in the kingdom. All his subjects were attached to the devotional service of Lord Vishnu, and all of them observed the vow of Ekadashi. Due to remaining engaged in the devotional service of Lord Hari, everyone lived happily in this kingdom. There was not a single poor or miserly person in his kingdom. After living happily for many, many years in this way, once Amalaki Ekadashi conjoined with Dwadashi, which occurs during the waxing moon in the month of February and March. Realizing that this Ekadashi bestows great benefits, the king and his subjects resolved to observe this Ekadashi with proper rules and regulations. Early in the morning on the day of Ekadashi, the king and his subjects took bath in the river and went to the temple of Lord Vishnu, which was situated on the riverbank. Within the temple there was an Amalaki tree. I guess at that time it was probably not known yet as Amalaki Ekadashi, but or maybe it was, I don't know. Where the king placed a pitcher filled with water and an umbrella, cloth, shoes, and 5 kinds of jewelry for the worship. Thereafter, the king worshipped Lord Parashuram and Amalaki by offering water, shoes, canopy, gold, diamonds, rubies, pearls, sapphires, and fragrant incense. Then the king, led by the sages and followed by his subjects, offered prayers to Lord Parashuram as follows. O Lord Parashuram, O son of Renuka, O you who is situated under the shade of the Amalaki tree, O bestower of material enjoyment and liberation, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Then they offered prayers to the Amalaki tree. O Amalaki, O sustainer of the universe, O offspring of Lord Brahma, O destroyer of all sins, we offer our respectful obeisances to you. Kindly accept our offering. After properly worshipping the Lord and Amalaki in this way, the king, accompanied by his subjects, remained awake that night within the temple of Lord Vishnu. They sang songs and offered beautiful prayers with devotion and praise of the Lord and the Amalaki tree. At that time, by the arrangement of providence, a hunter came there. This hunter earned his livelihood simply by killing various living entities. When he came to the temple, which was decorated with a ghee lamp, incense, and other auspicious items, and saw that many people were remaining awake while glorifying the Lord, he sat down with them and began to contemplate what was going on. The fortunate hunter took darshan of Lord Damodar, who was placed on top of the pitcher, and began to hear the transcendental topics of Lord Vishnu. Although he was afflicted with hunger, he was astonished to see this, and remained awake that whole night while hearing the glories of Ekadashi. In the morning, the king left for his palace, accompanied by his subjects. The hunter also returned home, and happily took his meal. After many, many years, the hunter left his body. By the influence of Amalaki Ekadashi, and as a result of his remaining awake on the night of this Ekadashi, in his next life the hunter became a king with innumerable elephants, horses, chariots, and a large army. The hunter took birth as Vasurat, the powerful son of King Vadurat, who ruled the famous city of Jayanti. King Vasurat ruled 1 million villages. He was as brilliant as the sun, as effulgent as the moon, and as powerful as Lord Vishnu, and as tolerant as the earth. He was truthful and fixed in his occupational duties, and thus became a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. One day, King Vasurat, who was very kind and charitable, lost his way while hunting in the forest. He was extremely tired and afflicted with hunger. Not finding any other alternative, the king lied down within that dense forest, using his arm as a pillow. At that time, some lechas who lived in that forest came before the sleeping king and began to torture him in various ways. Considering the king to be their enemy, they attempted to kill him. They thought that this king had previously killed their fathers, mothers, sons, grandsons, and uncles, and has compelled us to wander aimlessly. Speaking in this way, the mlechas took up their different weapons and began to beat the king. But to their utter surprise, none of their weapons touched the body of the king, and as a result, the king did not feel any injury at all. When all their weapons were used up, the mlechas became morose and lifeless due to fear. They lost all power to move any further. At that time, a beautiful, extraordinary woman, decorated with various ornaments and fragrant sandalwood paste, appeared from the body of the king. She was decorated with an attractive flower garland, and her eyes were reddish due to anger. She raised her eyebrow, and holding a disc in her hand, she rushed toward the mlechas to kill them in an angry mood. Within a moment, that powerful woman killed all the sinful mlechas. After this incident, the king woke up. On seeing such a ghastly scene, the king, who just got up from his sleep, became frightened and stunned. When the king saw his fierce-looking enemies lying killed, he became astonished and said, "Alas, who is that most well-wishing friend of mine who has protected my life by killing these powerful enemies? I convey my heartfelt gratitude to him for this great act." At that time, a voice from the sky was heard. Who else except Lord Keshava is capable of protecting his surrendered souls? He alone is the maintainer of surrendered devotees. After hearing this voice from the sky, the king became extremely amazed, and his heart melted with devotional feeling. Thereafter, the king returned to his palace and ruled his kingdom just like Indra without any obstacles. The sage Vasishta continued, "My dear king, any person who observes the vow of this sacred Amalaki Ekadashi undoubtedly returns to the abode of Lord Vishnu." Amalaki Ekadashi ki jai. Okay, so now we'll read from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so we chanted. Okay, so we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 5, text number 41. Nanubhuya na janati puman vishaya tikshnatam nirvidyate svayam tasman na tatha bhinna dhi pare nanubhuya na janati puman vishayati kshnatam nirvidyate svayam tasman na tatha bhinna dhi pare nanubhuya na janati puman vishayati kshnatam nirvidyate svayam tasman na tatha bhinna dhi pare Nanubhuya na janati puman vishayatikshnataam nirvidyate svayam tasman na tatha binnadhi parai. Anybody on Zoom?
Nanubhuyana janati Puman vishaya tikshnatam nirvidyate svayam tasman na tatha vinadi paraihi.
Na, not. Anubhuya, experiencing. Na, not. Janati, knows. Puman, a person. Vishaya, Vishayatikshnataam, the sharpness of material enjoyment. Nirvidyate, becomes aloof. Svayam, himself. Tasmat, from that. Natata, not like that. Bhinnadhi, whose intelligence is changed. Parai, by others. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Material enjoyment is indeed the cause of all unhappiness, but one cannot give it up unless one has personally experienced how much suffering it is. Therefore, one should be allowed to remain in so-called material enjoyment while simultaneously advancing in knowledge to experience the misery of this false material happiness. Then, without help from others, one will find material enjoyment detestful. Those whose minds are changed by others do not become as renounced as those who have personal experience. Purport. It is said that unless a woman becomes pregnant, she cannot understand the trouble of giving birth to a child. Bandhya ki buddhibe prasava vedana. The word bandhya means a sterile woman. Such a woman cannot give birth to a child. How then can she perceive the pain of delivery? According to the philosophy of Prajapati Daksha, a woman should first become pregnant and then experience the pain of childbirth. Then, if she is intelligent, she will not want to be pregnant again. Actually, however, there's an extra period in this one. Actually, however, this is not a fact. Sex enjoyment is so strong that a woman becomes pregnant and suffers at the time of childbirth, but she becomes pregnant again despite her experience. According to Daksha's philosophy, one should become implicated in material enjoyment so that after experiencing the distress of such enjoyment, one will automatically renounce. Material nature, however, is so strong that although a man suffers at every step, he will not cease his attempts to enjoy. Tṛpyanti neha kṛpaṇā-bahu-duḥkha-bhājaḥ. Under the circumstances, unless one gets the association of a devotee like Nārada Muni or his servant in the disciplic succession, one's dormant spirit of renunciation cannot be awakened. It is not a fact that because material enjoyment involves so many painful conditions, one will automatically become detached. One needs the blessings of a devotee like Nārada Muni. Then one can renounce his attachment for the material world. The young boys and girls of the Krishna consciousness movement have given up the spirit of material enjoyment, not because of practice, but by the mercy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his servants. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Shreshtam Manamapi Shachiputramatra Swarupam Rupam Tasyagrajam Urupurim Mathurim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Barijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamshta Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna in the 3rd chapter, 36th verse, poses the question to Krishna. He asks Krishna why people perform sinful activities, material activities, unwillingly, as if by force. So even if somebody doesn't want to commit sin, or even if somebody knows that something is bad for them, still they do it. And so Arjuna, he asks, why? What is that force by which people are doing these things? And Krishna answers with this verse, Kama esha krodha esha rajoguna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidhenami havairnam. He says, it's lust. Kama esha krodha esha rajoguna samudbhavaha, which is born from rajoguna, from the mode of passion. And this lust is the all-devouring, I think Prabhupada puts it, the all-devouring sinful enemy of the conditioned soul. Mahashana Mahapapma Vidhenam Ihavairnam. And one should know it to be his enemy. Vidhenam Ihavairnam. Vidhi means to know, so you should know it to be your enemy. So lust is the main problem of the conditioned soul in the material world, because lust is what's keeping him here, even like Arjuna is saying, even unwillingly. Dhyayato vishyam pumsa sangasteshu bhajayate sangat sanjayate kama kama krodha bhijayate krodad bhavati sammoha sammohat smriti vibramaha smriti brahmshad buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashiti. So by one meditating on the objects of sense gratification, one associates with them, and then from that association lust develops, kama. And then from lust comes anger. Why? Because lust can never be actually quenched. So from the frustration of one's lust, then they develop anger. And then krodhat bhavati sammoha. From this anger, from this frustration of their lust, people, they go crazy. Sammohat smriti vibramaha. And they forget. Their memory goes away. They forget what's right and wrong. They forget things, what's worked in the past for them, what hasn't worked in the past for them. Sammohat smriti vibramaha, smriti brahmshad buddhinasho. From this loss of memory, their intelligence goes. And then buddhinashat pranashiti. And when their intelligence goes, then then everything's finished. Then they're thrown back into the material whirlpool, so to speak. So this lust, it really just leads to a very hellish existence. There's also a verse. How does it start? Punaf punashcharvata charvananam. How does it start again? It starts with an M, isn't it? Yeah, matirna krishna parata svatova. Mito vipadyeta graha pratanam adanta govi vishatam tamisram punaf punashcharvata charvananam. Prahlad Maharaj says that one who is lusty, one who has made a firm determination to enjoy in this material world, nobody can convince him. It never comes to mind that lust is the cause of his suffering, and even if somebody tells him to his face, he won't listen. And therefore, because his senses and his lust are out of control, adanta gobir vishatam tamisram, then he's thrown into this hellish condition of just chewing the chewed over and over and over again. Punaf punashcharvata charvananam. So lust really, it's just this source of just a completely hellish life. And it causes people to just go absolutely crazy. There's this happened in 2019, I think. There was this man, I think he was in his late 20s or early 30s or something like that. He was a pretty young guy. And he got into this, he was like addicted to like pornography, and he got addicted to this, particularly to like this one, I don't know how to put it. There's this woman, online, and she, and you give her money, and then she does some performance. And so he was living with his parents, and without his family knowing about it, he spent $275,000 on this woman. And he cleaned out all of his father's savings, his life savings for retirement and everything. His father couldn't retire. And he just completely, it's like really tragic actually, just became completely addicted to this woman. And his father's actually very merciful. He didn't report him to the police or anything for stealing money. He just sent him to rehab, for pornography addiction. And then he came back from rehab, and he said, okay, he said you could still live here. He still lived with his father. And he said, but you have to follow these rules. First of all, you can't, none of this anymore. None of this. And he said, okay, and then there's some other rules, of course. And so he was living there, but eventually he fell back into it. And again, he stole money from his parents. And then eventually his father said, okay, you have to leave. You can't stay here anymore. And so he did, he left. And then just like I think a couple days after he got kicked out, he came back, and he came back to the house. It was in the evening. His mother was sitting at her computer with a glass of wine, and he just went up behind her and just killed her, shot her in the head. And then his father came home. He killed his father. He called his brother. He said, "Hey, come home. You need to come home right now." His brother came home. He killed his brother. Killed his whole family. And so he killed his whole family, and then after that, he went back to his hotel. He stole his brother's credit card, and he sent $500 to this woman. And, got his, whatever. And so this is like the perfect example, actually. Yeah, he went to jail for the rest of his life, yeah. He actually had one other brother who wasn't living at home. So that was like the only member of his family who's left now. He went to jail for the rest of his life, yeah. So this is like the perfect example. Krodad bhavati samoha, samohat smriti vibhramaha, smriti brahmshad buddhinasho buddhinashat pranashyati. That his intelligence completely went away. He killed his whole family. He had no need. It's not like by killing his whole family he would be able to indulge his lust more. But he just went crazy. He just went crazy and killed his whole family. So, therefore, anybody who's intelligent, great sages, and even materialists have advised that one should control lust. One should keep lust under control. Now, one conception, which is the conception of kṛpaṇā-bahu-duḥkha-bhājaḥ, is that one should control lust ultimately by indulging it, by experiencing lust. For example, if one is like really like, we're talking about sexual lust, but really lust in general. But I'll give the example of means material lust is material desire to enjoy in the material world. But the example of sexual lust, there's this idea, it's a Freudian idea, that repression. If you repress your desires, if you repress your sexual desires, then they'll just increase and increase and increase. And so really one should actually just indulge their desires, and then by that, one can control them. And so that's similar to what kṛpaṇā-bahu-duḥkha-bhājaḥ is saying here, that one cannot give it up unless one has personally experienced how much suffering it is. Therefore, one should be allowed to remain in so-called material enjoyment while simultaneously advancing in knowledge to experience the misery of this false happiness. So one relevant question to ask when faced with this conception is, where is that actually happening? Where is it actually happening that somebody's indulging their lust and their lust is gradually going down? Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, and it can just be practically experienced, that lust is like fire. If you pour fuel into fire, then the fire doesn't decrease, it increases. So lust, when one engages in lust, it fuels the fire of lust. It gives you more to meditate on. It gives you, it's because what's the nature of lust? It's not that you engage your lusty desires and then you feel satisfied. You want it again and again and again. There's no satiation point. In fact, the so-called satiation point actually just keeps moving further and further away from you. I think Jayadvaita Maharaj gives the example that at one point he says you have to throw a bomb off down there just to feel something. And it's true. And therefore, people are becoming more and more and more degraded because their lusty desires, and not just in the realm of sexuality, but in so many things, music and culture in general, that the line keeps moving because they don't feel satiated by this thing. So then it just keeps going and going and going. And therefore Kali Yuga is progressing very quickly. So why should one have to engage in it in order to give it up? Just like why should I have to drink poison in order to understand that poison is bad for me? I think it was brought up recently in class, I think, that a fool, or that an intelligent person learns by hearing, and a fool, he learns by bitter experience. So if somebody has had the experience, for example, of drinking poison, and they tell you, hey, don't drink poison, then it's probably it's intelligent to take their word for it and not to experience it oneself. You can logically understand that, hey, this person is drinking poison before, they didn't like it, it caused them to suffer, and therefore they're qualified to instruct me. They know what happened, and they can tell me. And therefore, from that testimony, I can avoid drinking poison. So, therefore, one doesn't have to experience material enjoyment, material sense gratification, in order to give it up. Of course, there is in Krishna consciousness a license for material enjoyment in the form of the Grihastha ashram, but even that is very regulated. But still, Srila Prabhupada often makes the point that you don't have to do that. You don't have to at all experience material enjoyment in order to give it up. So then how does one give it up? Because there's many many spiritualists who are trying to give it up. Like, for example, Buddhists, they're very strict. Many of them are very strict in giving up sense gratification. They have a very austere kind of program. Mayavadis also are generally known to be very austere. But Srila Prabhupada, in one purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he describes that the Buddhists and the Mayavadis, although they're very austere, they're advocates of utter materialism. Why? Because their process, first of all, their process is full of it's just awful. It's just like really austere and terrible, and there's practically no no kirtan. But fine, okay, austerity, but for what goal? The goal is just to become nothing. In the case of the Buddhists, the goal is to become nothing or to just merge into some light. So the process is extremely difficult for a goal which is not really relishable in any way whatsoever. So what's left? For most people, just utter materialism. That's why I've given the example before in class that, like in Thailand, for example, it's a very strict Buddhist country, Theravada Buddhist country. But the majority of the people there who claim to be following Theravada Buddhism are eating meat. They're not living very austere lives. They're just kind of happy-go-lucky. And I'm not picking on Thai people. I'm just saying in general. This is the trend. Therefore, there's this verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Ye nye ravindakshama muktamaninas tvayasta bhavat avashuddha buddhayaha aruhya krishrena parampadam tatav patantiyadau nadata yushvadangreha. That although Mayavadis, they engage in very austere practices for spiritual realization, their intelligence is impure. And therefore, they don't reach the highest goal, but instead fall back down into the material world. So one needs a higher taste to give up a lower taste. Vishyavani vartante nirahara sidehinaha rasavarjam rasopyasya param drashtva nivartate. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that in order to give up sense gratification, in order to give up a lower taste for sense gratification, one has to accept param drashtva nivartate. One has to accept a higher taste. And this higher taste is like this previous verse that I quoted was saying, Ye nena vrindaksha is reverence, awe and reverence, love for the lotus feet of the Lord. Everybody's looking in this world for some kind of lasting situation, even outside of this world, in the Brahmajyoti or some void or whatever. Everybody's looking for a lasting situation. But the only process that can actually provide a lasting situation is devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this devotional service is obtained only by the mercy of, like Prabhupada says in this purport, one needs the blessings of a devotee like Nārada Muni. Then one can renounce his attachment for the material world. So bhakti, devotional service, is not achieved by one's own effort. Just like we recently read the pastime of Ajamila. Ajamila, he was a brahmana, and he knew about devotional service. But when he was faced with this situation, when he was in the forest, and he saw this, Shudra embracing this, prostitute, he became extremely bewildered. And even he remembered all the instructions of Shastra. He remembered, whatever he remembered, it doesn't say exactly, but he went through all the arguments in his head. That lust just leads to suffering, one should not indulge their lust, he went through all that in his head. But because he didn't call out, because he didn't pray for the mercy of the Lord, he fell down. So it's not just by one's own effort, just by logic and reasoning and determination alone that one achieves devotional service, that one achieves the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada says in a number of places, bhakti comes from bhakti. So one has to get the mercy of somebody who already has bhakti, and then this bhakti can be awakened in his heart. Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. This mercy of Guru and Krishna and of the Vaishnavas, after the living entity wanders in this universe, in so many different species of life, then after many lifetimes, if one has faith, then Guru and Krishna give to him the seed of devotional service. So this seed is the instructions, is initiation and the regulative principles of devotional service. So if we follow these regulative principles, we follow the instructions of the spiritual master with faith and with determination, then this perfection of devotional service, this perfection of bhav, of love for Krishna, will awaken in our hearts. There's this verse, Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sa sadhanabhidha nitya siddhasya bhavasya prakatyam hridi sadhyata. So that one who performs with their materially contaminated senses, one who performs activity which leads them to sadhya, or to the perfection of sadhya bhav, sadhya bhava sa sadhanabhidha. When one performs that activity by which sadhya bhav is awakened in their consciousness, that's called sadhana. So when we perform sadhana, then nitya siddhasya bhavasya prakatyam hridi sadhyata, then naturally, over time, this nitya siddha bhav, the love, this eternally perfect love that the nitya siddhas have for Krishna, this is prakatyam hridi sadhyata, it's awakened in our heart. But the qualification is that one has to have faith. And so when one performs their sadhana with very deep faith and determination and a conscious effort to achieve the mercy of the Supreme Lord, then naturally this comes. So one shouldn't think that by my own effort I'm climbing the ladder of devotional service, so to speak, or I'm growing the bhakti lata, or whatever. But devotional service is a descending process, and when we're engaging in sadhana bhakti, then we're praying for the mercy to descend upon us. And this mercy descending upon us comes in the form of the awakening of spontaneous devotional service within our hearts. And then there's a whole development after that, leading up to prema. And so then at the end of life, when one achieves this, then he can go back home, back to Godhead, and be reinstated in his original position. And not even just at the end of this life, actually, in this life, jivan mukta sa uchite, that one can be liberated even in this life, and engage in service on the spiritual platform, in his spiritual body, actually, in this life. But it's a very, very high realization that comes from a lot of mercy and a lot of faith and determination in one's Krishna consciousness. So, seeing the time, I think I will stop there and see if there's any questions or comments, perhaps. Joseph, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you for talking about this lust. I don't have any lusty desires because I'm old now. And, I took a vow of chaste conduct 10 years ago at a Zen center, actually, right before I came here. He knew me. And anyway, but now I hear there's this other kind of lust. So I use this analogy. My hobbies, are those lustful? And if so, how can I tame this? I know I'm chanting and I'm here, but I need to do more. So for people in the world that have their feet in two worlds here, how can we tame that lust or get rid of it? Actually, I'd like to
Yeah. Well, Srila Prabhupada would often emphasize Yeah.
We can just talk about
Fishing, surfing,
desire to enjoy.
same fishing, surfing,
Yeah. Well, there's certain things, Srila Prabhupada would often emphasize that there are certain things which like aren't compatible with Krishna consciousness. So when I guess first of all I should define, when we talk about lust outside of like sexual lust, it just means the desire to enjoy this material world, the desire to like enjoy the material energy separately from Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada would often emphasize that if one is having trouble giving up their certain desires or certain activities, then one should just first focus on what they can add. So Prabhupada would say, add chanting. If you can't give up, then at least just start chanting. Of course, you're already chanting, but I'm just saying in general. Add chanting, add reading, add hearing, and then naturally one will get a taste, and these things will gradually fall away. Now, of course, we should try to make an effort to give up certain things which are incompatible with Krishna consciousness, like, for example, meat eating, illicit sex, gambling, intoxication. But in the beginning, we can just focus on adding, and then gradually, if we fill up our time with all these things that are directly in relation to Krishna, then one thing is we just won't have time to engage in sinful activity or engage in our material activities. And another thing is that these things naturally lead to developing a taste for Krishna consciousness, a taste for devotional service, by which one can give these things up naturally. So is that okay?
Yeah, I like to add too.
Okay. Tyler Prabhu.
Thank you for a nice class, and you really honored the verse well in the example that you gave. I had a couple just reflections that are on the same theme, but I did have a question for you.
Okay.
So the Amish, they have this thing, Rumspringa. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
What is it called?
Rumspringa. It's this 2 years they get after high school to go out in the world. They've been living Amish, and I saw a documentary on it. It's called The Devil's Playground. So go out in the Devil's Playground for a couple years, go enjoy yourself. Hopefully you can come.
2 years
Hopefully
is
you
a
come
long
back.
time, actually.
Yeah.
That's like you can get really bewildered in 2 years.
That's why I didn't. It was tough. It was showing all these people going out into it and what they did with their lives.
I didn't know it was 2 years. I
Did they
thought it
come
was
back?
like 6 months or something like that. 2 years is that's like a decent amount of time.
Wow.
No, it's 6 months. More people do that too.
Yeah.
Probably some of them will come back.
Yeah, and the idea is if you come back and then you don't stay, you're like shunned. So it's like go have your kicks, go enjoy, if you need to, but come back and then live a nice Amish life. And so then also, I never understood when like bachelorettes the night before they're going to get married, they get with all their friends and they hire strippers. I never really got that. You're about to make this vow for the rest of your life, but you're just like
One last hurrah.
enjoy as a stripper. It seems all danger and it seems foolish. It's like that idea of someone that can't sober up because they're trying to enjoy their last time. But if you enjoy it, then it's not going to be your last time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the point of trying to enjoy that? The next day, you're renouncing it forever. So it doesn't make sense trying to enjoy material nature. I remember hearing this one thing too, where like in the urban city streets where they're selling heroin, if there's word on the street that someone overdosed on some heroin the night before, they go try to find those dealers because they're like, that's the good stuff, right? So for me, trying to enjoy material nature is it's dangerous at every step. It's very tricky, right? And that's the bomb going off, right? You're hunting around the streets to find out the dealer who sold the drugs to the person who OD'd last night because it's the good stuff. Yeah, so that's not to try to enjoy this. So ultimately, and this isn't my question, but I'm getting to it, this is an argument that's it's going to be refuted, right? Is this? Yeah. So it's being refuted? Yeah, because when we first started saying the verse, I wasn't really sure where we're at right now, and I was like, really? That's the process? And then it was like to the purport, you're like, okay, this is false logic for someone trying to get their sons to go out and do it. But those are just some ideas about the traps of trying to go out there and enjoy. So these Mayavads, then why are they? Because austerity is hard. That's the opposite of trying to enjoy, your senses and encourage lust. So they're doing these austerities, the Mayavads. Mm-hmm. But for what end? Just so when they leave this body, they go to a better destination? Like, why would they spend their time?
They think that the ultimate goal is to merge into the Brahma-jyoti. So it's a misconception. So they think that in order to merge into the Brahma-jyoti, then, because in the Brahma-jyoti there's no variation, there's no variegatedness, there's no, so you have to basically get over all of your everything. You have to get over your, forget about your any kind of qualities you have, forget about your personality, forget about your individuality, and try to see everything as one. I'm you and you're me, and both of us are Brahman. So that's their goal. And yeah, and so to that end, basically, there's different processes. Some, like for example, like the Agoris, which I don't know if that even is like a really bona fide sampradaya. Like if it's actually like a real sampradaya, I know about them, and they're kind of like well known for being kind of crazy, and But anyway, their philosophy is basically that like through tamogun, then you just it like snaps you into some kind of like spiritual realization, because you surround yourself with all this disgusting stuff. Like they like eat their own stool, and they rub themselves with like the ashes from like dead bodies, and they'll like drink their own urine, and like their babajis they only eat out of like human skull. So they just like surround themselves with like the mode of ignorance, thinking that okay, it's just gonna snap. And they eat like roadkill and stuff, like raw. Like they'll just find whatever on the street, and they'll just like
I'm glad you didn't go down that road.
yeah. So their philosophy is basically that like through tamogun, then it snaps you into like some kind of spiritual realization, because you're just like, it's just so awful. It's just like so. I didn't even really know exactly what their philosophy is, or how that works. But yeah, basically, you have to go undergo like really or some really austere program, and then from that it helps you realize that this material world is actually a place of suffering, that this body is just a place of suffering, that there's no happiness, and yeah, it's really intense. Yeah, it's really intense. Because they don't have the concept of mercy, Yeah. They don't really have the concept of mercy, because the Brahma-jyoti is like it's not a person, So basically they're trying to get there on their own. They're trying to break down all these, all their conditioning by their own effort. But the philosophy that the devotees have is that Krishna's a person, and he's merciful, and he helps us. We don't have to do everything ourselves. Actually, we can't do everything ourselves. Even they can, but they think that they can. So
Prabhu,
Hare Krishna?
one second, Vijay Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, I can wait, no problem.
My question is when Prabhupada came to America, and lot of hippies, they joined his movement, and they were the ones who are like very loose in like enjoyment or whatever. So it seems like okay, they experience that, and they know that it's temporary, and they know it's very like flickering, whatever pleasure they're deriving. Then it made it easy for them to renounce, or they understood like okay, whatever material enjoyment is flickering, and is kind of useless. So how do we so
well, it's not that this verse and this purport aren't saying that it doesn't help at all to have experienced material sense gratification, because it does to some extent, but the emphasis is that you don't have to. There's some people whose philosophy is that actually you have to experience material sense gratification before you can renounce it, because otherwise it's just impossible, because you don't even know what you're renouncing. But the philosophy of the Bhagavatam, the philosophy of Nārada Muni, is that you don't have to. You don't have to go through it. And Yeah, there were many hippies, and they were very loose people, and they were involved in a lot of sense gratification. And certainly it did help, some of them, that they just got burnt out, that they experienced all this stuff, and it still didn't make them happy. I think if you talk to a lot of Prabhupada disciples who were like really immersed in that, then they can attest that actually, yeah, we were trying all these. Because the thing is with the hippies, they were trying to find something beyond themselves. They were trying to dedicate them, they were trying to find some other reality. And they thought that you could access that reality just by drugs and sex and whatnot, and it was all very, But some of them, a number of them realized that, even those who didn't come to Krishna consciousness, but a number of them realized that actually this isn't the answer. And they just got burnt out with it. And then those who came in touch with Srila Prabhupada and were open to his preaching, then they realized that actually Krishna consciousness is the answer. And because they had already gone through that, it helped. But there are many great devotees who never experienced sense gratification. Like, for example, I don't know, have you ever eaten meat in your entire life? Well, there's many Indian devotees who haven't ever in their life eaten meat before. Yeah. Or like, for example, Mukunda Charana Prabhu, he's never tasted alcohol in his entire life. So, yeah. And so, but it's not that he has to go out and drink alcohol in order to, give it up. He never did it, and he's never going to do it. So, yes, Prabhu.
So, recalling how this pastime is playing out, we find that Nārada Muni, when they met Nārada Muni, the 10,000 Haryasvas first, he gave them like a riddle, in a sense, and they were so smart they figured it out. But he's giving them knowledge at the same time. Mm. And then they send them off to practice bhakti, right? They're gone. And so both things have to be there. The knowledge, knowledge, jnana and vairagya, they go together. Mm. But jnana is not enough. There needs to be a process by which you can get the higher taste. And that's what the Vishaya Nivartante verse is all about. Because what does it mean? It's like, I've had it with cigarettes. I'm coughing, I can't even climb the stairs anymore. That's it, But if that's all you have, so many people, they try to give it up. But then after some time, just maybe I'll try filter cigarettes this time. It's like the desire is still there. That's what that verse is about. The desire is still there. And that's what happened with, the Jama you mentioned, he wasn't really practicing, he wasn't chanting and dancing, and so but he had the knowledge. But eventually, when he came in touch with the allurement, he couldn't hold it. But he didn't have association with devotees. He didn't have the process of devotion. So that's what Prabhupada came to give. He says, okay, doesn't matter. You can be doing the worst type of thing, but sit down here and chant, and then take this prasadam, which was delicious. And people say, well, it sounds like a good deal. So they're chanting. Many people got up to leave when he started talking. There's that, but there's that fortunate few that listened. So they got the knowledge and the process, and that a certain few could become fixed in renunciation and stay with the higher taste. And after some time, yadavadi mamachete Krishna paradavinde, is that even the thought of the previous activities is disgusting. I never knew about these Agoris. That sounds like the most horrific group. And what I'd like to meet like someone who went through that and get what's at the other end, No, thank you. But both of those are there. The knowledge, the books, the lectures, the association, and the willingness to undertake the process by which you get the higher taste and remain fixed. That's how you
Vijay Krishna Prabhu?
Yes, Amogha Prabhu. May I?
You may.
Yes, thank you very much. You're very kind. Dandavat pranams. Prabhu, material enjoyment may be distasteful, as Prajapati Daksha is saying, but the austerity required for us to experience the higher taste is declared by Krishna to Arjuna as not different from poison. And the text is in Bhagavad Gita 18:37. So based on this, my question is, if for me to taste the highest happiness, I do need to consume poison, why go for it? In other words, are the Hare Krishnas, in a sense, no better than suicidal? Please?
Well, anything which is, there's this saying, I don't know, but it's something to the effect of that's something which is cheaply obtained can be cheaply given up. So one should engage anything which is worth getting requires some kind of austerity, requires some kind of process of getting it. So with Krishna consciousness is the ultimate goal of life. It's the ultimate good for the soul. But because we are materially conditioned, because we have material contamination, then the process of Krishna consciousness, because it's so antithetical to material consciousness, yeah, it feels like poison. Prabhupada gives the example, like if somebody has jaundice, then one has to eat, the cure for jaundice is that one has to eat a lot of sugar. But when one eats sugar with their jaundiced tongue, it tastes very bitter. But gradually, as one keeps taking sugar and sugar, more and more, then gradually it starts to taste sweet. So similarly with Krishna consciousness, because we're materially contaminated, it feels like poison. It doesn't feel very nice. It doesn't feel nice to give up if one's attached to their, material activities or their material whatever. It doesn't feel good to give up these different things, to give up their material identities, to give up their false ego. It stings a little bit. But when one does this, then one begins to taste Krishna consciousness. One develops a taste for, attraction toward Krishna consciousness, and less attraction toward material life, material sense gratification. But when one achieves the actual goal of Krishna consciousness, it's like beyond, you can't even imagine how ecstatic it is. You can't even imagine how much nectar there is in having achieved Krishna consciousness and being in Krishna consciousness. Krishna gives glimpses within this life for one who's on the platform of sadhana. But when we hear descriptions of the spiritual world and the ecstatic love of Srimati Radharani, or the ecstatic love of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then it's very clear that the nectar that one can experience in Krishna consciousness is absolutely nothing like anything which is conceivable by the conditioned souls. So yes, it is a little bit austere because we're materially conditioned, but it's worth it because you mentioned about being suicidal. We're the opposite of suicidal, actually, because we want to achieve eternal life with Krishna and an eternal relationship with Krishna. So, but those who are focused on material sense gratification only, actually they're suicidal. And Sri Upanishad says something to this effect, that they're actually killers of the soul. Meaning that by their activities, they're forcing themselves to be bound up again and again and again in different bodies. Purusha prakritisto hi bhungte prakriti janganan karanam guna sangosya sadasa dyoni janmasu. In various species of life, due to their association with the material modes of nature, they have to suffer again and again and again. But for devotees, they engage in a little austerity, but for ultimate happiness. So, is that okay?
Oh, Amogha Prabhu, is to be expected, better than okay. Very helpful, if I may say it, brilliant answer to my question. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna.
One thing more, it's not poison, it's bitter like poison. It won't kill you.
Yes, you're right, Nārada Prabhu.
Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Krishna Prasad ki jai. Amalaki Ekadashi ki